I'm thinking
That's
The
it.
circle of doom.
the circle of doom. It actually worked. Wow, that's cool.
Wow, stop it.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. It is Monday, March 17th. It's 10 a.m. Pacific time. Jenny's got her Guinness.
It's
And it's
5
green.
p.m. here.
Well, yeah, good disclaimer. It's green. Or is that just your cup?
That's just the glass, actually. Yeah. But
Well, it's appropriate that the woman in Ireland would have her Guinness. So I hope everybody's having a good day and wearing some green if you do that. I've got my green earrings.
I do have green on.
You do? Aaron, green check?
Oh, something
Oh, no.
so inappropriate. But keep that.
Just green underwear on.
I think I have a little bit of green on my socks. Oh, yeah. All right.
Well, it's good to see you guys today. We've got a full big panel to discuss the topic of the day. And so we're joined by Robin Atkins and Amy Sousa for a second time. Thank you so much for joining us, you two. And why don't we just really quickly run around and do a brief introduction so that everybody just say your name and just say a couple things about yourself, and we'll move through so that people who aren't oriented to this discussion can orient themselves. I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and I am a coach in Washington State, and I have been hosting dialogues on this channel for a couple years now. So thank you so much for joining us. Jennifer, you want to go next?
Yes, hi, I'm Jennifer Friend, and I'm a psychotherapist in private practice just outside Washington, D.C.
Jenny?
I am Jenny Holland. I'm a Substack creator. My Substack is called Saving Culture from Itself. And I am in Northern Ireland, in Belfast.
Fantastic. Thank you. Christine?
Hello, I'm Christine Siefenwolk, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I also work with a group called Critical Therapy Antidote, which is a huge network organization for therapists, dissident therapists, I should say.
Robin?
Hi, I'm Robin Atkins. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the Midwest and busy mom of 4.
Awesome. Aaron?
Hi, I'm Aaron Kindsvatter, and I'm a licensed clinical counselor. I have licensure in Florida, St. Augustine, where I live, and I'm also licensed in Vermont and Maine.
All right. And Amy?
Oh, and I'm the co-founder of an organization that advocates for against the indoctrination of psychotherapy patients, and it's called the Society for the Ethical Practice of Psychotherapy.
Awesome. And then that leaves Amy for last.
Hey, I'm Amy Sousa. I'm a mental health advocate and also do women's rights activism. I have a Substack called theknownheretic.com, and I also am the Known Heretic on Twitter, using embodiment to analyze the gender industry and to do work that protects women and children legislatively.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And we usually have Deborah Knox with us, and she does a fantastic job of introducing Solid Ground to everybody. We're missing her today, and I am really bad at remembering the details, but Solid Ground is a peer support community. We are online, and you are welcome to join us. We host synchronous meetings, 4 to 5 meetings per week, facilitated by wonderful people, including Christine and Aaron and Deborah, and I host a meeting as well. And it's just a great chance for people to talk about all kinds of things that are going on in their lives, mostly relating to authoritarian ideologies and how they've impacted our lives over the past several years. But it's a really wonderful, supportive community, and if you're interested in joining, you can go to solidgroundsupport.com. We're kind of laggy and glitchy today, so bear with us. If it gets really bad, or maybe, we can just switch over to Zoom, and later on I can splice the 2 videos together. So our live stream will come in 2 different chunks, but our video later on, I'll fix it. Does that sound like a good idea to everybody? Would you guys like to do that? Because it's a little off-putting, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah, it looks
Okay.
really glitchy.
So we're going to sign off right now. I'm going to send everybody a Zoom link. And you folks that are already with us live, the 26 of you that are watching right now, catch us in just a second. Look for a new link to pop up on our YouTube channel. So we'll see you guys in just a bit. All right, take two. We're going to give this a shot. So we're here. We're now live on YouTube using Zoom instead of the usual thing that's been annoyingly glitchy lately. So last time we had a great discussion with Robin and Amy that kind of ended up with some discussion of spirituality. And I don't remember exactly where we left off and what parts of that conversation stood out most to you guys, and where should we jump in today? Does anybody have a thought? It's a big old group, so it's hard to jump in. But just jump in. Feel free.
Not everybody at once.
Right.
Well, I don't know if it pertains to spirituality, but I see an intersection between it. That we were talking about the idea of impulses and the different manifestations of impulses that come. And I have been thinking quite a bit about that because, well, I just seem to keep running into aggression. And Robin had actually said something to me, which I appreciated, or just validated the kind of aggression that I've been experiencing as I've been questioning some of the premises, practices, and theories of critical social justice. And so I remember that as part of our conversation, Robin's ideas about my bringing up the concept of the aggressive impulse. And I do wonder how that intersects with spirituality. The reason I wonder that is because I can feel the gravity of aggression pulling me. Because I'm starting to feel like more like I'm involved in like trench warfare here or something. It's just like, so I don't like that feeling. I don't want to be in that spot. And yet I wonder a lot, is that where I'm supposed to be? And that strikes me as a spiritual question. But it's been kind of a hard couple of weeks. Or a hard week since we discussed that, and that's been on my mind a lot. But I don't know if that quite captures the ideas of embodiment and so forth that Amy and Robin were bringing to us. So I don't want to veer us off course, but that was a really important conversation for me personally, and very much it's interesting how a few words can bring one comfort over the course of a week, and Robin's words to me brought me quite a bit of comfort that I've kept with me since our last meeting. So that's what I took away from our last meeting together.
If I'm remembering correctly and guessing correctly, I imagine my comments that I remember were around the difference between male and female aggression, and female aggression being more covert and behind the scenes, and what might appear more passive, but can be just as subversive, and that male aggression being more physical or outward or obvious, and that aggression is sometimes necessary for both male or females, and how we've kind of villainized the aggression we need to have when it comes to protection of those who are less defenseless or more defenseless than others, particularly the need for males to protect women and children in certain situations, physically at least, and for women to be able to protect ourselves and children, and sometimes men in our lives, especially from emotional perspective. And so I don't know if that's what you remember, Aaron, but that's kind of the comments I remember in response to you.
Well, I could share the experience that I had and am having as it relates specifically to that, but I don't know if that would be useful or interesting.
I would like to know.
Okay. Well, so so the backdrop to this is that, I'm on this listserv for counselor education and supervision, and my whole sort of story is that I left, my job as a tenured professor, and I left essentially the profession of higher education and really don't want to have anything to do with it because of what's being taught within it, because of what's going on in the professional organizations. And so I left that. I started an organization called the Society for the Ethical Practice of Psychotherapy that's designed to advocate against the political or ideological indoctrination of patients. Um, and so from time to time, though, I'm on this listserv of counselor educators where these ideas will come up. And I feel called to sort of question them when they do. And I do it nicely. And I do it from a place of curiosity. I try really hard not to make assumptions, but I do talk on the listserv occasionally about what I am seeing in my practice. And I tend to get a lot of people who I'm starting to think of as almost like refugees from these DEI trainings. And these people are losing jobs, they're feeling terrible, they they feel that they've been psychologically abused, and they're experiencing, honest to God, symptoms of of serious mental disorders as a result of these trainings. But most recently, I there was a posting where there was this person who was saying that she has created an escape room experience designed to introduce the concepts of implicit bias. And so the idea is that you get into this escape room, and I guess the idea is the way that you get out is by putting together clues that will sort of lead you to implicit bias. Learning about implicit bias, I guess, is probably the way that it works.
Sounds like
And
a fun night out.
Oh, well, what it struck me is it's the kind of thing that will eventually find its way into like a school setting or something like that, because it's designed to
It's
make
like you're torturing someone until they give the right answer,
well, and then
right?
I don't think it's made like
Ugh.
that didn't occur to me until later. I'm sure it's designed to be fun.
It
Yeah.
actually reminds me of SEL quite
Mhm.
a bit
So
in schools.
it's that it struck me that way too. So So what I said is, I have a lot of patients who are coming in because they've been subjected in their workplaces to DEI trainings that are premised on the idea that they are racist or, some other kind of ist, and they don't know it. And the implicit association test is being used as sort of a justification of that. Is there a place in the training like the one that you are proposing here to discuss some of the flaws and limitations of this implicit unconscious bias idea? And do you also talk in there about the impact that social mobbing and ostracization has on people? And so it was a question which you could answer, oh, yes, we cover that, or no, that's really not the conversation we're looking to have in this training. What I got instead was this, this kind of mobbing where people were accusing me and my patients of being racist. And I and to which I said, but do you see what's going on here? Like, this is exactly what I am talking about is the problem, that I'm asking a legitimate, respectful question about this training, and that's being reframed on an attack of a person or persons of color. And that, this really doesn't seem good. This doesn't seem healthy. This doesn't seem scholarly, is the point that I'm trying to make. Anyway, where it gets back to, Robin, what we were talking about is uh, what I am doing in asking these questions. And I'm very upfront about this. I said, I have a bias against implicit bias. And it's starting to sound like this might not be a good thing. And I have some real questions about how it's being used and how it's being explained. But that is being reframed as a kind of aggression, and the persons who are rebuking me in these conversations are claiming to have been, I guess, aggressed against, or the other thing that I'm sort of stand accused of is not approaching uh the conversation with cultural humility, which I take to mean unquestioning acquiescence. So, but it's, aggression is implied. And I guess what I have been struggling with for me is my questioning, which is, I view it as a kind of advocacy to ask these kinds of questions. But is that in fact a kind of aggression? Is standing up to this a kind of aggression? And I don't know. But
That's interesting.
I've been thinking a lot about that. Like, would it have been more gentlemanly, more a better thing to simply let this person, say, here's this escape room experience designed to introduce people to the concepts of unconscious bias, and just, let that go? Or is it more gentlemanly to step in and say, hey, excuse me, I want to ask about what's going on here. This is
Mm-hmm.
quite right. So the word gentleman is a very important word for me. It's been with me my whole life. It's what I've been taught to be, and it's sort of what I kind of hold myself to. But it's hard to know, because it's hard to keep oneself in check, to know whether one is using being a gentleman as a kind of excuse to mask one's aggression, or is one in fact acting in accordance with what it means to be a true gentleman. And so that's, by the way, where this ended up was, it ended up with sort of this, I guess, what would be considered sort of a public shaming, because the Vermont Cynic, which is the UVM newspaper, published a series of pretty unflattering articles about me, and those were sort of put on the end of this discussion with the note, "This tracks,"
Oh
and
gosh.
makes me sound like
It's trying to
Dracula.
humiliate you.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to humiliate me, and
Well,
I don't know that it really worked, but it
yeah.
wasn't really comfortable either.
Your question, Aaron, about whether this is aggression, whether this is appropriate, whether this is gentlemanly, I think that tracks really well with what Robin was just talking about, with the protective impulse that is so necessary. That's just coming out directly and speaking to something that you're concerned about. You're addressing it, but you're trying to do it within these polite social, scripts. You're not attacking it, you're not putting them down, you're just asking some questions. So I think that tracks really well with what Robin was just bringing up. I don't know, what do you others think, Amy?
I heard a really lovely phrase last weekend in a different context, but it seems applicable here, where another gentleman was saying, I fight not because I hate what's in front of me, but because I love what is behind me.
Hmm.
And I suspect that in you speaking up, you were saying something that others likely agreed with, some of whom may not have felt comfortable or able or had the courage to express. So, you expressing those concerns, I feel, was likely having a voice, not just for yourself, but also for others who felt that they could not confront the situation directly. And the fact that the whoever you were having that conversation with was not open to having an open conversation about it, the level of defensiveness and reactionariness around it tells me that there was something not totally on the level. Because if, I don't know, if in a different context, like, if I was having an activity, and you were questioning the activity that I was holding for others, if I was not able to have an open conversation about what might be workable about the workshop, what maybe I, hadn't seen, what was, in my blind spot about the workshop, if I couldn't discuss that blind spot openly and I had to jump into attacking you and silencing you, that already tells me there was something in that person's blind spot. Because if they felt really good about what they were putting forth, then it seems to me that she would make her own justifications from that position. If you were critiquing me on something and I felt really good about it, I would say, I see what you're saying, but here's why I still think what I'm doing is really valuable, rather than going into a counter attack mode. And so, yeah, I think what you did was well done.
Something that's been on my mind a lot. I want to see if this analogy works, or if it's not too much of a non sequitur. But something that's been on my mind a lot. I started talking about this a little bit with some of you guys before we did the live stream. Is COVID? Thinking about what happened to us during COVID and how shattering that was for our social understanding, how things work around us. I mean, it shattered everything for so many people. And I can remember when I was in Washington State, the restrictions were pretty harsh, and the mask requirement went on for a long time. And I was somebody who refused to wear one of those things. I just didn't wear it, and it meant that social situations were really uncomfortable for me. Going to the grocery store became this thing where I sat in the car before I'd go in, and I would just be shaking with fear because I knew I was going to be treated like I was a pariah by the people that would see me in that store. And people were going to be scared of me or angry at me and possibly attack me. And I did get verbally attacked a couple of times by people, but I just refused. I felt like if I put this on, I am adding to the pressure on all of us to conform to nonsense. And I don't believe in this. It's ridiculous. And I refuse. And so for me, like, the part of me that was scared to do it, to go in without it, was really big, because I'm a pretty agreeable person that wants to be liked and wants to get along with other people. So that was a really big thing. But the part of me that was defiant about it was bigger. And so it was this wrestling match between these two parts of me. And I can remember talking with this woman who was, she was a little bit older than me, and she was really sweet. And she was like, that agreeable part of her was even bigger, but the defiant part of her was pretty big. And so talking with her about it, she's like, I wear it and I hate it. And it helped me to see that other people, it's like what I was Amy, I think it was what you were just saying about how some of the people in that group are feeling, all kinds of other ways that maybe they're just not courageous enough to say something about it. But when he speaks to it, they're the ones that are kind of behind him in a sense. And so I felt like that. But then I had this other thought. I would see very few people who were like me not wearing a mask. And there were some stores we just couldn't go into. They would just flatly kick you right out. But there were a lot of stores you could still get away with it, but you just didn't see anybody else not wearing it. And every now and then you would see someone, and it was often women.
Interesting.
Yes.
And I thought about the particular pressures on men, that there's that it adds an element of aggression, that there would be this implicit aggression, like men have an even greater pressure on them to make themselves meek and to get along and to, don't be scary. It's like when you, I noticed this when I had little kids, that, people do this like reflexive smile at your little kid when you're pushing your kid in a stroller through the grocery store. You walk around with your little child and everybody looks and there's very often this sort of reflexive, like, smile at the kid. And it's like, do they really feel warm when they see the kid? Or is this a social thing that we cue each other? I'm no threat to you. I'm no threat to you. And I would notice that reflexive smile happens more with men than women. And I think that men are pressured very hard to appear harmless. And so so that the extra pressure of the agreeable versus the defiant, I wondered about that for men. And so, like, when you talk about a gentleman, what does a gentleman do? Does he make himself meek so that he does not threaten others? Or does he stand up for what he believes? And I guess I'm kind of just drawing this parallel, and I thought it was interesting.
Can I add to, or can I
Yeah.
make a comment about that? Sorry, Aaron. I think this is really interesting because I also had a hard time with the mask situation. And I decided when I went to the pharmacy one day that I was going to just not wear it. And I didn't put it on. The woman behind me started yelling at me, telling me that I was causing trouble and spreading illness, and that I wasn't protecting her rights to feel safe and to be safe in this public space, etc. And then what happened next surprised me. There were about 10 or so people behind me. All of the men from that group of 10 came to my rescue and said, you know what, leave her alone. This is a choice. If you choose to wear your mask, that's on you, et cetera, et cetera. But I did feel a protective sense of them coming around. But the thing is, nobody took their mask off either, like in solidarity. So there was this whole thing where, yes, there was a protectiveness that I felt, wow, I'm feeling really held right now. And I'm here by myself. This feels really nice. And I thought, gosh, you also don't really agree with the mask situation, but you're also complying. So there was, those are the two parts that I wanted to just kind of piggyback on from personal experience with this. And there were a couple of people in the store when I was walking out that started to clap, and that came from the men.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I was just going to say that two things. One, then I think we could say clearly that the desire to protect or speak for those who may not speak up, it does not reside only within men, as evidenced by Leslie and Christine standing up to this tremendous power. Two, I think I don't think I've ever said out loud before the importance of being a gentleman, what that is. I don't think I've ever really talked about that before. And I was feeling a certain amount of pressure to describe it now, I think, as I was thinking back to this, because I am worried that you put your finger exactly, Leslie, on what has been bothering me, which is that, I'm worried that I'm coming across as scary or aggressive or mean or whatever. And the accusations that were made against me, on the one hand, I think it's nonsense, and it's, people are kind of making fools of themselves. On the other hand, geez, that's still that hits somewhere. I don't believe it, but it still hits. And so now I'm saying that there is part of me that's saying, I'm a gentleman, right? Yeah, I'm a gentleman. So it's, you really put your finger on something that was happening for me, Leslie, even as we're having this conversation.
Can I bring in a few things?
Mhm.
Um, so I'll try to take you on the journey my brain just went on. The first thing is I was thinking about how during COVID, the idea that I have a right to feel safe around you by you covering your face, whether you're sick or not, I have the right to feel safe from that. But now, just a few short years later, we're being told by the same administration that women don't have a right to feel safe in actual designated safe spaces. That by a man appearing as a woman, he's therefore not aggressive. And that to me, there's still, that just came to me, that juxtaposition and the gaslighting that feels to me is there. And that being a like more feminine aggression, subversive, like you have to go along with this, but it also involves the male aggression that male just by putting on a costume can suddenly not be physically aggressive. And what's the difference between actual designated socially acceptable safe spaces versus just in general public? Do I have a right to always feel safe?
Mhm.
Which I would say no one has the right to feel any type of way. Feelings are just things that are indicators of what's going on inside us. But in certain safe spaces, we designated those because of biological realities, not because of feelings. So women and children are biologically less able to defend themselves. So that's why we have designated spaces for them. Um, and then that tying into the spiritual element, bringing that back in, like to me, the difference between a cult and a religion is that a religion can be questioned. And typically those of that religion welcome questioning. And sure, let me clarify that for you. And you don't have to agree. Whereas a cult, you're not allowed to question. So there's that piece in here too. And both of those leading me to the sense of identity, even the word gentleman, that being a part of your identity. What does that mean? And has that been robbed from you? But also like we're all in this new space where we have to declare all these things about ourselves to share our identity. But if your identity isn't the socially acceptable identity, then somehow you're an aggressor. So this is all tied in. I don't know where it all ends up, but that's just the journey my brain went on.
I think there's also a real tendency among a kind of social justice warrior woman to really misuse or abuse a gentleman's goodwill for very manipulative, toxic purposes. And it's interesting what you said, Robin, about the men in bathrooms or shower locker rooms. Obviously, I mean, the male type of aggression is still there, but they're trying, like you said, they're trying to make it sort of, they're trying to hide it behind a dress as if that would work. But the like the domineering type of aggression here is female. And I mean, I think if you were Aaron, if you had been a woman posting that, well, you absolutely would have been, you would have been checked, as they say. They wouldn't have let it pass because they cannot, because their worldview is based on lies and manipulation. So any mild criticism requires a kind of a nuclear response. But I bet that their response was tailored to you because you're a man of good faith who actually cares to come across in a gentlemanly way. And my feeling on that is that that exact thing is being used against you to torment you emotionally.
Well, you know what? What's crazy is it works. You know, for as much as I understand about this, and I couldn't agree with Robin more on her delineation between a cult and a religion. I think that's perfect, uh, perfectly said. But it's like Leslie has said on many occasions, like the it doesn't matter how many degrees or how much knowledge or how much learning or you have, that when you are the target of manipulative tactics, it hurts, or you can feel the gravity of it. I can feel it now as I'm
Mhm.
talking, and
Mhm.
it really is impactful. And I think, Leslie, you've made that point when you've been talking about, well, how are counselors who are being subjected to this during their training, that's going to place them in a not very good spot
Mm-hmm.
to be working with people around mental health issues. And I've been thinking about that a lot, uh, for the last month or so since you last said that. And I think that is absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can prepare yourself to a certain degree for this kind of treatment and have a certain amount of experience, and yet it's still effective. Just like a punch to the face, still hurts, even if you're a
Right.
professional boxer, you know.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's a form of bullying and shaming. And there's this sort of movement that it's not what you do, it's not how you live your life or how you treat others that's important now. It's that you hold the correct opinions, the officially endorsed opinions. And I think they resort to bullying and shaming to try to bring people in line with those opinions. And it's really become socially acceptable to be horrible to people with whom you disagree. And even just small things, this will sound like a small thing, but you would never have seen this 20 years ago. At Mom's Organic Market for a while, they put a sign up out front saying, be nice or shop somewhere else. What kind of way is that to speak to customers? And incidentally, when you went in that store, there was barely any pretense at customer service. They were unfriendly and surly. But it's like we have a right to kind of moralize with you before you even enter this store. And to me, it sort of implies, oh, the customers are going to, behave badly because they see us as these lowly, grocery store clerks. And so we're kind of, standing up against this, perhaps oppression that's going to take place, and we're in the right to do it and have a right to be rude to customers, instead of creating a nice atmosphere by saying, we're so happy you're here, please come again, and modeling the good behavior. They feel like they can behave absolutely horribly to other people.
Mm.
Yeah. Actually, can I just tell a quick story about aggression?
Please.
Not that didn't happen to me personally, but it happened on Thursday or Friday of last week, and I wrote about it for my Substack. It's gone viral all over Ireland. An Israeli was visiting Dublin, and I don't know how he came on the radar of these far left Palestinian activists, Irish and otherwise. And they were following his Instagram, and they found him in a pub, in a restaurant pub, and they started haranguing him and screaming at him. They came up to his table, and he videoed them, and they're screaming at him, fuck you, and Zionists aren't welcome here, and this, that, and the other. And then he said to them, okay, I love you too. And one of the girls turned around and spat on him.
Mm.
And it was on video, and it was all over the place. And, it's like this, what you guys were mentioning, like the tension seems to be ratcheting ever up somehow. Like there was like maybe a little bit of a release in 2024 at the end of the year. But it seems like the fear level among people has grown, and there's like a carte blanche to behave like psychos because you're so convinced of your moral righteousness.
Yes.
You can do the most immoral thing, short of actual violence. I think spitting on someone is the most disgusting thing you can do short of actual violence. That's why it's actually illegal. It's considered assault. And, this is the high moral ground you think you're on. And like I wrote in my Substack, like never, not one time, never, ever, ever have the people spitting on the Jews been the good guys. But you are somehow so trapped. Like you're like sniffing your gas. It's like really, you're in a very bad place. You're in a very dark place. So yeah, it's really, really remarkable to see how I thought maybe the pressure would release somewhat, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
Well,
It's
Jenny,
that same mindset that makes people think I'm being a good person by trying to get somebody canceled and destroying their livelihood because they said something that I disagree with. And they think I am so wonderful that I'm doing this. I hope this person ends up homeless. I hope they can't afford to feed their family. Aren't I nice? I mean, it's so vomitous to me.
It's borderline personality disorder, like writ large.
Well,
Gone, girl.
watching journalists, news anchors in America, like I have to take a vacation because there's been so much news and it's just emotionally devastating to me since January 20th. I'm like, are we at the level of weaponizing mental health to the point that we can no longer function as basic adults and do our jobs? Because heaven forbid we have emotions that we are responsible for managing outside of our career. It's just, yes, you're right. The ratcheting up of the narrative that we're under assault just because news is happening.
Right. But also, Leslie, to go back to your original question, I mean, COVID definitely made it 100 times worse. But I mean, you guys know this better than I do. I mean, think about 2017, 2018, and all the scary critical race stuff on campuses, and what happened with Ben and Brett Weinstein and everything. What was it called? Evergreen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this has been going on a long time. This has to be a very long, prolonged period of mass psychosis.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Oh, Aaron, you go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's a really good point. It's been a long time.
It has been. I was thinking about one of the things, I know I've talked about this before, but during COVID, we had a lot of people calling other people sheep and making fun of people for going along with things. So you were a sheep if you were going along with the COVID narrative, but you were a conspiracy nut if you were going along with the counter narratives. And there were all these ways of mocking people for believing things. And one of the things that I thought about at the time was that it's that social impulse and the way that we are impressed upon by our social network and the people around us is actually a really beautiful thing about what it means to be a human being. I mean, we don't make fun of the geese that flock together in V formations. They move as one in these really beautiful ways. They're synchronized where you can't really tell what happened before what and how they just knew to do that. And we have that same thing. And that's what makes us want to be liked and want to go along with what other people are saying. It's not that impulse that's terrible. It's how it can be co-opted and exploited that's terrible. And so, Aaron, when you're talking about how, going through one of these social justice type trainings or programs, if you're forced to sit through all of this struggle session material that really sort of is an attempt to remap your brain, but ends up being quite socially traumatic for people, to say that you can go through that and not be hurt is like telling somebody, intellectually, you understand that a knife going into your arm is going to hurt and make you bleed. So understand that. And now go do it. Like, it doesn't make it hurt any less. It doesn't make you bleed any less. We still get this it's very wounding to us socially. And it leaves, like when you're talking about a therapist who comes out of a program like that being compromised in their abilities to really work in their field, I think that they are, because they've got a giant gaping open wound right now. And I feel like, yeah, Jenny, fabulous point. We've been dealing with this for a really long time. This is not new, this whole thing. It's not COVID didn't do this to us. But I feel like what it did was it left a giant gaping wound in a lot of us that now when we're trying to deal with these other issues, we're seeing the splintering of ourselves be even worse. And I think it's added fuel to a fire in a way that we're all kind of walking wounded trying to deal with this thing. And nobody really wants to talk about COVID anymore. It's like it's passé to talk about that. You're talking about that again. Oh, the vaccine again, or whatever. But we haven't dealt with it. How can we even deal with it? How can we even reconcile that?
Yeah, I love, Leslie, what you brought up about the geese and how humans are social animals. And I write a lot on my Substack about instincts, and a lot of these things are instinctually grounded. Aggression is an instinct. Even shaming, Jennifer, you were talking about shaming and the public shaming that can happen, and that's an instinct. And it really goes into what Jenny said too, that this has been happening for a long time with all of the BLM and then moving into COVID. And this, I feel like these things are really connected, the public shaming and the aggression of those who are resisting this public shaming. These two are really tied in. And I think that there's a discernment piece that is lacking in the cultural narrative about what is there is a right use of shaming. I think the shaming of those who are resisting these struggle sessions or the group mandates that have been happened to us, the shaming of that I do find inappropriate, but there is a sense of shame that can be used accurately, and that is going into what I think Robin was saying about the girls' spaces or locker rooms, like shaming the men who would violate those boundaries, or shaming those, as Aaron said, who might lead people into an emotionally abusive situation. There is an accurate use of shame, just as there's an accurate use of aggression, and this discernment piece, everything has sort of in these last few years been flattened down to such an extent that the discernment of when is the accurate use of these things, these values are in themselves neutral, but when they're being used in an inappropriate way, that's when they become a problem. And even kindness, and niceness can be a problem. All of this, kindness is everything. I've seen in Washington State, people have these, signs in their yard, trans lives matter. In this house, we believe X, Y, and Z, and kindness is everything. It always ends as, well, kindness is very appropriate in certain situations, but in other situations when integrity might be called for or aggression might be called for, kindness is not always the appropriate approach to any given situation. There are other approaches that are more important. Inclusivity is a great value. For example, when you're inviting the whole class to a third grader's birthday party, that's a great time for inclusivity. Inclusivity is not a great value to approach sex segregated spaces that were created for safeguarding purposes. So there's something about all of these where, the values in themselves are benign in a way. It's that we have to have appropriate discernment of when to use each of those things.
Strongly agree with that. I think discernment is probably the most important of all human qualities. I mean, you can be not bright or educated or credentialed in any way and still have really good instincts and really good discernment, and you will end up being a healthier, safer, better off person than someone who may be degreed out the wazoo but will accept a man in the same changing room as a 12-year-old girl. And funnily, story though, talking about instincts, when I was a little kid, this is like the early 80s, maybe late 70s, in my kindergarten, there was a boy who was a bit odd, and he used to try and sneak into the girls' toilet, and he would try and peek under the stall, and we were like 5, and we just all like a flock of birds, like literally like a flock of geese with a fox in the hen house, just went chased him out. Like we were like a hive mind. We were just like, we knew, because our instincts told us that this was deeply wrong and we felt extremely transgressed upon. Mm-hmm. And we took matters into our own hands. We didn't go into the teacher. We used public shaming. We used public disapproval, and we stopped him from doing that. And obviously no one took us tests, but imagine if little girls did that today, what would happen to them?
Well, there was just a case. I mean, exactly what, I mean, it's insane, but there was just a case in Illinois that came out on Friday at Deerfield Middle School. So this is middle school age kids, 10, 11, 12, where girls were had a boy in their locker room. They went to the administrators to tell the administrators that they felt uncomfortable with a boy in their locker room, as any girl at that middle school age would. And instead of taking the side of the girls, the vice principal walked the girls back to the locker room and attempted to force them to change in front of the boy so that he would feel comfortable. and it's just this totally backwards. And that there was a couple of the girls, and so they were doing as your group did, Jenny, attempting to be in solidarity with one another. And the administrators, these are the administrators I think should be publicly shamed.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the phrase that keeps ringing over my head is kindness at the expense of integrity is aggression turned inward.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron, I think that goes to like your need to speak up was integrity. And had you shut that down in the effort to be kind, that would have just been self-aggressing, like aggressing against your own gentleman nature. And I think that's part of the use of shame in an inappropriate way, is if I can get you to turn against yourself, then you're doing all the work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I remember when I was still in higher education, I kept throwing up all the time. And I think it was a result of that exact thing, that the anticipation of having to, repeat these lines, and this was before, the vibe shift or any of the organizations or anyone was saying anything about this. So feeling very isolated and very backed into a corner that I was going to end up in that exact situation, Robin.
And before I left, I was teaching, but I was also an academic advisor and I was an admissions counselor. We kind of all did the same thing. If you were teaching, you kind of were responsible for all of that. And I had several male students that changed over to have me as their advisor because they were completely shamed by the advisor that they had, that they weren't allowed to have an opinion or to say anything, especially if they were white. And several of these guys had used the word specifically, I feel traumatized by this program and traumatized to go through this program because I'm told, not just by the professors, but the class is telling me I don't have I don't have a right to speak because I am a man, a white male. And those were the situations I think that contributed even more so to maybe me having to teach some of this stuff. It was that, and hearing that this was traumatizing a big group of people, that was actually really sickening to me. So, and it was the first time that I'd ever, and I've worked with men and other, this was a career change for me. So my first career was in another industry, and I've never worked in that kind of environment before where we were talking about feelings all the time. And, it was a place where you were learning about, psychology and how to be a therapist, and, to kind of see these men sort of get, gaslit, shamed, bullied, I think would probably be the best word. And for the professor to encourage it and to say, listen to your class. This is what they're saying about you. You don't have the right to speak here. There was nobody there to protect them. And they came to me. I couldn't do anything. I wasn't in their class, right? I wasn't teaching their classes.
That what you just described too. I don't think that just happens to men, because what you described, Christine, is exactly what one of my patients, who is a woman, told me.
Mm-hmm.
Happened. It describes exactly.
Yes.
Well, I don't know how to cap this off. It's such a fantastic discussion, and I feel so lucky that I get to sit and have these talks with people like yourselves. I've just learned so much through listening to your perspectives and hearing the way each of you encounter these ideas and analyze them. It's what a joy it is to be able to have conversations like this. There are a lot of things about these times we live in that are confusing, but I'm continually gratified and enriched by the ability to have such deep and insightful talks with people like yourselves. Sorry about the glitchy stuff in the beginning, y'all. Thank you, everybody who joined us in the chat. I have been following it with just kind of looking at it. Cody R shared some really cool stuff earlier about and Cody, I'm imagining you're a dude. So his and correct me if I'm wrong, job is in he builds things for escape rooms. Like he actually does that work, and he's talking about how it's pretty woke, and it's kind of like he actually referred to himself as being in the radical center recently as a way to describe his position. I thought that was pretty cool. A lot of people really like seeing Henry, Jennifer's dog, seeing Jennifer's kind of badass leather jacket too, and really just a lot of agreement with the things that everybody's saying. So thank you all so much for a great conversation today and for joining us, Robin and Amy. It's really nice to have the two of you on. And happy St. Patrick's Day. Go get that Guinness. For me, it'll be a long while because it's only 11 in the morning, so that's going to have to wait. Oh, there's Robin. She's got it going. Awesome. Cheers, you guys. See y'all.
Cheers, guys. Cheers.